Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself in that frustrating loop? You're buzzing with excitement to learn English, right? You download every app, buy all the books, bookmark 100 websites, and then maybe a week or two later, you're just overwhelmed. Everything kind of grinds to a halt, and you feel like you failed. Sound familiar? You're definitely not alone. It's a cycle I've seen countless times, and honestly, one I've personally fallen into more than once.
Yeah, that feeling of being swamped, it's so common. And it often stems from this deeply ingrained belief that more is always better. More hours, more apps, more books, more grammar rules, you know? But what if that whole approach is fundamentally flawed? What if the real secret to finally achieving fluency isn't in adding more stuff to your plate, but in skillfully, deliberately taking things off it? What if less really is more?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. The minimalist's approach to English. Our goal for you, our listener, is to explore how to cut through all that noise, sort of eliminate the overwhelm, and give you a genuinely effective, sustainable path to language learning. We're talking about getting superior results, not by studying harder or longer, but by studying smarter and often, significantly less. This deep dive is all about intentionality over intensity, effectiveness over effort, and clarity over clutter. And it's designed specifically for you, the learner who's seeking those aha moments without the usual information avalanche. Let's really paint that familiar picture for a moment, because recognizing it is like the first step. You've made the decision. This is it. I'm going to master English. Right? Your motivation is sky high, maybe after a great trip or a new job opportunity. So you download a dozen shiny new apps, you invest in a hefty grammar textbook that promises complete mastery, you subscribe to an English magazine, your browser bookmarks just swell with links to YouTube polyglots, grammar blogs, all that stuff. For a week, you're a whirlwind of activity.
Hours a day, immersed in what feels like the right way to learn. And then, week 2 hits. Those enthusiastic app notifications. They start to feel like nagging reminders. The textbook, once pristine, it starts gathering dust. And the sheer volume of resources creates this paralyzing indecision. Like, should I tackle flashcards or watch that grammar video, read the news, or find a language partner? The initial fire just dwindles into guilt, and soon enough, the whole project is abandoned.
That cycle, just as you describe it, is unfortunately the default for so many people. It's built on this assumption, right? That if you just throw enough time and resources at the problem, fluency will somehow magically emerge. But this more is more mindset, while it sounds good, maybe it's well-intentioned, it leads to incredibly predictable pitfalls. It really does. It makes you wonder, though, why does this pattern repeat itself so consistently, even for really motivated learners?
Yeah, exactly. And here's where it gets truly interesting. Our sources, they point to 4 major issues, often intertwined, that trap us in this cycle. First, there's information overload. The internet offers this almost infinite well of materials, but ironically, too much choice often leads to paralysis, not progress. Research actually shows this. When you're faced with tons of options, people are way less likely to make a choice at all. Or if they do, they don't stick with it long enough for it to actually work. You drown in options.
Right, drowning is a good word for it.
Second is decision fatigue. Just the mental energy you spend choosing what and how to study each day. That's energy you're not spending actually studying. It just depletes your willpower before you even open a book. Makes learning feel like a chore before you've even started.
The choosing becomes the task itself.
Exactly. Then third, we often fall prey to the illusion of progress. We do all this busy work that feels productive, but honestly yields very little real-world benefit. Think about color-coding every single grammar note or meticulously memorizing 50 obscure kitchen words. Feels good in the moment? Sure. But it rarely translates to, spontaneous conversation or real understanding when you actually need it.
Yeah, that feeling of accomplishment without actual skill building. It's tricky.
Totally. And finally, number 4, there's unsustainable pacing and burnout. Believing you must study for hours every single day, that's just a recipe for exhaustion. Life inevitably happens, right? You miss a session, you feel like a failure, and then the habit breaks entirely. Your journey just grinds to a halt.
So, okay, how do we actually cut through this chaos, this predictable pattern it creates? The answer, surprisingly, is simple but really powerful. The Pareto principle. You probably know it as the 80-20 rule. This principle basically states that roughly 80% of the consequences or results come from 20% of the causes or effort. Applied to language learning, this is huge. It means roughly 20% of English vocabulary accounts for maybe 80% of daily conversations. About 20% of grammar structures are used in 80% of common situations. And crucially, a focused 20% of your study activities will likely generate 80% of your actual fluency. The minimalist learner's entire strategy, it revolves around pinpointing and mastering that critical 20%.
That 80-20 rule sounds incredibly powerful. But how does a learner actually, find their personal critical 20%? I mean, beyond just general lists, is it different for everyone? It feels like it could change everything.
Absolutely. And yes, it can be tailored, but think about it this way first. Why spend a whole month trying to memorize every single animal in the zoo when words like animal, dog, cat, and bird will probably cover 99% of your everyday conversations about animals? Or why drill the tiny details of the future perfect continuous tense when just saying, I will go, works perfectly well in almost every context you'll encounter early on? Focusing on that high-leverage 20% doesn't just save massive amounts of time and energy, it builds practical, usable skills much, much faster. And here's the beauty of it, right? That quick, tangible success. It fuels your motivation. Success begets success. It creates a positive feedback loop instead of that awful cycle of guilt we talked about.
Okay, so if we accept that only a fraction of English is truly essential for, let's say, effective communication, our task becomes wonderfully clear. Identify and practice that fraction. So let's start looking at the core components of English through this minimalist lens. Maybe start with vocabulary. That often feels like the deepest ocean to learners.
Definitely. Vocabulary. English has what, over 170,000 words in current use, something like that. The sheer thought of learning even a fraction of those it's daunting. And frankly, it's the wrong goal for most people starting out. The minimalist knows the real goal is to learn the words used most often. And here's a key insight. Mastering just the top 1,000 most frequent words. That lets you recognize around 85% of common spoken English. Push that to the top 2,000 words, and you're covering over 90% of the words in most written texts. This is the 80-20 principle right there, applied directly to the building blocks of the language.
Okay, so instead of those random word of the day apps that often throw obscure terms at you, you're really advocating for curated frequency lists. You mentioned the new General Service List, NGSL, or the Oxford 3000. What makes these scientifically compiled lists so much more effective for a minimalist than, just picking up any old dictionary?
That's a great question. Because they're not just arbitrary collections somebody threw together. They're the result of some pretty extensive linguistic research, analyzing millions, literally millions, of words from diverse sources, news articles, conversations, academic texts, all to identify the most common and useful words in everyday English. This scientific compilation ensures that pretty much every word you learn delivers maximum communicative impact. It's efficient. And the technique for learning them, you said it before, context is absolutely king. No rote memorization of isolated words. Because as you know, a word learned in isolation is fragile. It's easily forgotten.
Right, just floats away. So how do we make sure we're learning words in a meaningful context, not just seeing them in a random sentence?
By making it personal, that's the key. A word learned in a sentence that's meaningful to you becomes a powerful tool. It's ready for recall. Take the word essential. Instead of just memorizing the dictionary example, water is essential for life. Which is true, but maybe not memorable. You create your own sentence. Something personal and true for you, like, my morning coffee is essential for a good day. Or, getting enough sleep is essential for my productivity. That personal connection anchors the word deep in your memory. I remember reading about Maria from Spain, a marketing professional. She was just drowning in, 5,000 flashcards, rarely remembering them. She basically deleted everything, committed to just 5 NGSL words a day. 5. And for each one, she wrote personal sentences about her work, her family, her hobbies. In 3 months, she'd mastered less than 500 words total, but her ability to read industry articles and actually participate in meetings, it improved more than in the previous 2 years of flashcard hell. She deeply learned the right ones for her life.
Wow. Okay, that makes a huge difference. Now, grammar. That's where so many of us, myself included, were taught to be maximalists. I remember slogging through endless conjugation tables, obscure exceptions, only to find I could maybe explain the third conditional perfectly on paper, but I'd still hesitate trying to order a coffee. It's such a frustrating paradox, isn't it? Why do we feel compelled to learn so much grammar we rarely actually use?
It's an interesting point. And it makes you wonder, right? Do native speakers actually have all those complex grammar tables running in their heads all the time? Of course not. We don't. We have an intuitive feel for what just sounds right. And that feel is built from hearing and using common patterns millions of times, usually starting from childhood. So the minimalist focuses on those patterns in what we call chunks of language, not abstract rules pulled from a book. Instead of trying to master all 12, or some people say 16 English tenses right away, master what we could call the functional 5. These are simple present, present continuous, simple past, simple future, using will or going to, and present perfect. Honestly, these 5 cover the vast majority of conversational needs. They allow for clear communication in almost any everyday situation, and the more complex tenses, you can often acquire those more passively over time just by encountering them in your reading and listening.
I love that idea of the functional five and learning in chunks. So we're talking about groups of words that commonly go together. Like, I'm looking forward to meeting you. Instead of trying to piece together I plus am plus looking plus forward plus the plus meeting plus you every time, it really reduces the mental load during conversation, doesn't it? You're just retrieving a pre-made block of language instead of building a sentence word by painful word.
Precisely. Exactly. The grammar is baked right into the chunk. Takes the pressure off. Remember Kenji from Japan, the engineer? He was a grammar perfectionist, apparently, who really struggled in conversation. His brain was just frantically trying to assemble sentences according to the rules he'd memorized. So his minimalist coach told him, forget the grammar books for a while, just listen to Chris Pratt interviews, or whoever, someone natural, and write down 10 full sentences daily that you find useful or interesting. So Kenji started absorbing these natural chunks like, at the end of the day, his fluency came not from more rules, but from actually unlearning his rule-based approach a bit and embracing a pattern-based one, noticing how native speakers actually put words together in natural spoken English.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so we've got vocabulary and grammar. What else? Skills practice. Listening, reading, speaking, writing.
Right. Skills. Well, the undeniable foundation of all language acquisition is comprehensible input. That means listening to and reading things you can mostly understand, even if not perfectly. The linguist Stephen Krashen, his famous hypothesis, states, we acquire language most naturally, not by consciously studying grammar rules, but by understanding messages that are just slightly beyond our current level. This is where the real sort of effortless growth happens, acquisition as opposed to conscious learning. The minimalist takes this totally to heart. Prioritize massive amounts of enjoyable and understandable input. Keywords, enjoyable and understandable.
Okay, so for listening, you're saying find that sweet spot, what linguists call the I+1 level, where you get the gist, even if you don't know every single word. Because if it's too difficult, it's just noise, right? And if it's too easy, you're probably not learning much. And I'm intrigued by this narrow listening idea. Instead of just picking any random podcast, you choose one topic, say cooking or a specific historical event, and listen to several different sources on that same topic.
Exactly. That gives you natural, low-effort repetition of the key vocabulary and structures, but in slightly different contexts, which is fantastic for memory and really internalizing the language. And for reading, it's a similar principle. Extensive reading. Pick a book you genuinely enjoy at or maybe slightly below your comfortable level, and just read for pleasure. Don't aim for 100% understanding. Please don't stop to look up every single word. That kills the flow. Graded readers, which are books adapted specifically for learners at different levels, are also incredibly powerful, often very underrated.
Can you give an example of that extensive reading in action?
Sure. Fatima from Egypt. We mentioned her earlier. She found assigned English reading at school just, boring and ineffective. Didn't stick. But then she picked up the first Harry Potter book in English. She'd already read the series in Arabic and seen the movies. So her existing background knowledge acted as this perfect scaffold. It helped her infer the meaning of new words like wand or cauldron from context. Reading suddenly became a joy, not a chore. She apparently devoured the entire series in English, and her vocabulary and her intuitive sense of grammar just grew exponentially without ever making a single flashcard for those books.
Okay, that's input. Now for output, speaking, and writing. This is where the rubber meets the road for many people. While input is the absolute foundation, output is where you truly solidify the skill, make it your own. But I think many of us, myself included, often wait until we feel ready to speak, which, let's be honest, often means never. The minimalist, I gather, starts speaking from day one, but strategically. Is that right? Because perfection is the enemy of progress here.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Embrace mistakes. They're not failures. They're learning opportunities. Seriously. For speaking, especially if you're just starting out, a technique called scripting is incredibly effective. It just means preparing and memorizing a short, maybe 30-second introduction about yourself. Who you are, where you're from, what you do, maybe why you're learning English. Having that ready removes that acute anxiety of the first interaction. You have something solid to say. Another core minimalist technique is shadowing. This means mimicking a native speaker's rhythm, intonation, pronunciation, just speaking along with short audio clips. You can do this totally alone with headphones anywhere, no partner needed. It helps train the muscles in your mouth and improves your physical fluency, the actual sound of your English.
Shadowing, I've heard of that. That was a bit weird, but maybe effective. And for writing, How can we apply minimalism there?
For writing, something really simple but effective is low-stakes journaling. Every night, or whenever works, just write 3 sentences in English about your day. What did you do? Who did you talk to? How did you feel? Simple stuff. This forces active recall and sentence formation, but in a completely low-pressure way. Nobody else needs to see it. Focus on clarity, just getting the idea across, not on using complex vocabulary or grammar. Think back to Ji-hoon from South Korea, the software developer we mentioned. Terrified of speaking on conference calls, his tutor had him shadow a 1-minute Steve Jobs clip for 15 minutes every day for 2 weeks. He apparently felt really silly doing it at first, but his mouth and tongue literally learned the physicality of English sounds and rhythms. He also wrote and memorized 3 simple sentences for his weekly progress report at work. Just 3. That small practice update was a huge success for him. It broke his cycle of fear and built real confidence for future meetings. Small steps.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why, the vocabulary, the grammar, the skills practice. But knowledge of techniques is, well, kind of useless without a system for implementation, right? Motivation, as we know, is finite. It comes and goes. A system, however, runs on habit, and that's far more reliable. The minimalist's goal, then, is to create a simple, sustainable routine, something so easy you can't not do it.
Absolutely. And to put this in perspective, think about it. A 4-hour cramming session on a Sunday, followed by 5 days of absolutely nothing. That's dramatically less effective than, say, 30 minutes of focused effort every single day. This isn't just about showing up more often, it's about leveraging how our brains actually wire themselves. Daily, short bursts of consistent exposure are far, far better at building strong neural pathways than those infrequent marathon sessions. It leads to deeper, longer-lasting recall. It's just how memory works. So it makes you wonder, what does such a consistently effective minimalist system actually look like in practice?
Well, our sources suggest something like a rule of 3 daily system, designed to take, in total, just 25-30 minutes. It's incredibly simple, and it's deliberately designed to sidestep that decision fatigue we talked about. So first, 1 input activity, 15 minutes. Choose one thing beforehand. Decide the night before, maybe. A short podcast episode, 2 pages of your graded reader, a 15-minute YouTube video on a topic you genuinely enjoy. The key is it's one thing you decided on ahead of time. No scrambling for content when you sit down. Second, 1 review activity, 5 minutes. Quickly reread the sentences you created for yesterday's new words, or maybe re-listen to a 1-minute segment of yesterday's podcast episode. This isn't about learning new stuff. It's purely about strengthening those neural pathways for what you've already encountered. Space repetition, basically. And third, 1 output activity, 5-10 minutes. This could be shadowing that 1-minute audio clip a few times, or writing your 3-sentence journal entry, or simply saying your personal script out loud to yourself. This whole routine, it can be completed in less time than a single Netflix episode. That makes it so much easier to maintain, even on your busiest days. And that consistency, not the intensity, is the real engine of minimalist progress.
And critically, following on from that, a minimalist doesn't need a dozen apps cluttering their phone or a shelf full of forgotten textbooks. You need a few well-chosen tools. A smart minimalist setup might just include 1 primary input source you stick with for a while, like 1 podcast series, 1 YouTube channel, or 1 book series at your level. 1 simple note-taking system, a physical notebook works fine, or a basic digital app like Google Keep or Notes. 1 reliable dictionary or translator. Honestly, Google Translate is perfectly sufficient for most needs. And 1 consistent method for speaking practice, whether that's a weekly tutor session, a regular language exchange partner, or just committing to daily shadowing by yourself. That's basically it. Resist the urge to keep adding more tools. The goal is to master your simple system, not to just accumulate resources.
That feels so much more manageable.
Exactly. And finally, maybe the biggest shift is that the minimalist mindset requires a fundamental reevaluation of the goal itself. Fluency. It's such a vague and, let's face it, often intimidating word. Many people imagine it means speaking exactly like a native speaker from London or New York. Perfect grammar, endless vocabulary. That is, by definition, a maximalist perfectionist goal. And maybe an unrealistic one for many. What's truly freeing here, I think, is that a minimalist defines fluency functionally, based entirely on their own unique life and needs.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. But what about someone aiming for, say, a really deep understanding? Maybe they want to read classic literature or engage in highly nuanced academic discussions. Does the minimalist approach still hold up then? Or is it primarily for achieving conversational fluency quickly?
Oh, it absolutely still holds. But the definition of functional shifts according to the goal. So, for a tourist, functional fluency might mean confidently ordering food, asking for directions, basic interactions. For a business professional, it's understanding colleagues in meetings and clearly communicating ideas, probably on specific industry topics. For an academic, it's reading research papers in their field and discussing them effectively with peers. The key, no matter the goal, is to define what fluent enough looks like for you. What do you specifically want to do with English? Ask yourself that. That gives you a clear, achievable target, and importantly, allows you to stop worrying about things that fall outside that target. An IT professional probably doesn't need 18th century poetry vocabulary, right? By narrowing your goal, even if it's a deep goal like academic reading, you direct your focused, minimal effort exactly where it will have the most impact. It's still about removing the non-essential for your specific aim.
Okay, stepping back then. The broader implication here is that the journey to learn English, it doesn't have to be this grueling march of endless study and mounting frustration. This minimalist approach seems to offer a calmer, maybe more intelligent, and definitely more sustainable path. It sounds like it's about making deliberate choices, finding those elegant leverage points, the high-frequency words, the core grammar patterns, the input you actually enjoy, and then applying consistent, gentle pressure day after day. By clearing away all the clutter, the inefficient methods, the overwhelming resources, you create space. Space for the language to actually enter your mind more naturally, space to focus on what truly matters, which is communication, and maybe most importantly, space to actually enjoy the process again.
Well said. That enjoyment factor is crucial for sustainability.
So what this all really means is the minimalist's promise isn't some magic pill, right? It still requires effort, patience, consistency. But it fundamentally transforms the nature of that effort. Instead of feeling like you're pushing this giant, immovable boulder up a hill, you're simply taking a few intentional steps along a clear path, day after day. And you'll likely look back in 6 months, maybe a year, and be genuinely astonished at how far you've come. Not because you studied more, but because you focused effectively on less. You will have achieved a profound freedom, the freedom to connect, to understand, and to express yourself, all born from that simple, powerful act of subtraction. What an enlightening deep dive. Really makes you rethink the whole process. It's about empowering yourself, isn't it? By simplifying, embracing those small, consistent wins, and really honing in on what matters most for your specific personal goals with English.
Indeed. It really does simplify things. And maybe this leaves us with an important question for you, the listener, to consider today. What maximalist habit or resource right now could you consciously choose to subtract from your current English learning efforts? Something that's maybe causing overwhelm or isn't yielding results. Think about how that single act of subtraction, just removing one thing, might actually unlock new freedom and maybe even accelerate your progress on your learning journey.